Midas, we make sure every stop on your road trip
3, 2, 1, push!
is one you want to make.
Woohoo!
Get road trip ready with a conventional oil change and tire rotation starting at $29.99. Request your appointment at Midas.com.
for the continuation of Remnant Day, and this is part of coming of age ceremony and missioning ceremony, commissioning ceremony training that you will commission on June 26th. And if you're watching at home, please write it down so that I can really check what you have heard and what you have learned from this, so that we can all gather the information together and make the masterpiece at the end of our 1 month journey. So today we have a guest speaker from the brothers that was been our church, part of our church for long years. He went to Australia for his work, and he have a lot of stories for us, and he will share a lot of things to us. So please, hope you enjoy and listen. So before we start, let us pray. Our Father, thank you so much for your wonderful love, Lord. Thank you so much that you called us as a children of God, Lord, and you have amazing, absolute plan for us in our life, so that allow us to open our spiritual eye to walk on this absolute journey, absolute covenant journey that you have prepared for us, so that despite the fact that people in the world live for me-centeredness, success-centeredness, material-centeredness, allow us to come out of that to truly desire to be an evangelism disciple, to save 237 nations and 5,000 disciples in our life, Lord. Allow us truly, at this time, talk about the things that are heavenly above, and truly share that contents together, so that we can truly enjoy the kingdom of God at this time, Lord. We really love you. We thank you. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. All right, so I'm going to invite our speaker, Hyunwoo Kim. Please.
Thanks, Jason. Hey, everybody. Again, my name is Hyunwoo Kim, and I'm honored to be here with you all. And thanks for everybody listening in remotely too. I'm going to be sipping on coffee throughout, just because I flew in 2 days ago, and I don't think I'm over the jet lag, to be honest. So hopefully I don't doze off while I give this seminar, but hopefully everyone can follow through. And thanks for joining us for the Hyunwoo Kim seminar. I'm sorry about the name as well. I couldn't think of a better name for this. But yeah, hopefully it is kind of about my life and practically where I've gotten to throughout my career so far. So thought it'd be appropriate at least. And yeah, all good. And just to give a bit of context to what we're going to be talking about today, just a bit of an introduction here. So firstly, who am I? Not that I'm super important, but I think it'll give some context as to the things that we're going to be talking about in some of the later sections. Number two, what had I done? And this is, of course, in the context of my career and what I've studied and what I've done throughout the different jobs and different roles that I've held. Three, what do I do? And that's what I do currently. And this is where it might get a little bit technically complicated, but I'll try to keep it as straightforward and simple as possible. And what will I do in the future, which is a great question, actually. And finally, what would you like to do? Because I guess the whole purpose and the point of this seminar and this presentation is to give you guys an example of what can happen to you and what you guys can choose to do, right? So, yeah, that's a bit of an introduction on what we're going to talk about. Is this? Yes, Jason, next slide, please. Can I press it? Yes, I can. All right, there we go. Yep. So, who I am, born 26 February 1990, 32 years old, which is crazier the more I think about it. I don't feel 32, really. In Korea, I moved to the US at 2 years old. I basically grew up in America, so I'm very not Korean, and my Korean is also not that good, even though my mom tried to teach me, throughout my childhood, but it didn't really take too much. Sorry. And grew up in Fort Lee, and as part of that, I've been part of Eden Presbyterian since I was around 12 or 13 or so, and yeah, kind of coming here and seeing this church and how much it's grown and how sophisticated it's become is actually a really proud moment for me. Like when I first took a tour around here, and I graduated with an accounting major from Rutgers University in New Brunswick, which some of you may be attending or not. And another fun fact is everybody from Rutgers and before that knows me as Hyunwoo, and everybody after Rutgers knows me as James. So most people here would know me as Hyunwoo, but don't be surprised if you hear James at some point in the future. Yep. All right, and what had I done? So this is a quick run through of the major things that I had done as part of my jobs before. So in the very beginning, I don't know if I would really call it a job, but tutoring is a big one, and this would just be, with the younger kids that you guys know, if they're preparing for classes coming up in high school or SAT and things like that, just helping out and helping them prepare for that, and also getting paid. The pay is not the point, but helping the kids is the point. But that's still experience in terms of how you interact with their parents, with the kids, and how you actually teach material. And then after that, I was a flower boy in Metropolitan Plant Exchange, which is still around, I think. Yeah, in Fort Lee. Crazy, yeah. I set it up pretty good before I left. And of course, it's not business or anything professional, but again, it's work experience and how to actually conduct yourself in the workplace and things like that. And then attended Rutgers for accounting for the 4 years. I'll get into 4-year, 5-year programs a little bit later on. And during my time at Rutgers, I also worked at the same time at Borger Financial Services. And then again, in my senior year, I worked at the same time going to Rutgers and in the PwC internment program. And then after that, joined the PwC full-time, working on the JP Morgan Chase engagement. And then after that, Macquarie, New York. And then after that, Macquarie, Sydney. So just a quick rundown. Jason. Thank you. And as we kind of go through this, there's probably going to be terminology that seems a little bit confusing. I'll try to explain it as best I can, but if anybody's got any questions, either raise your hand or kind of get my attention, and I'm happy to explain it as I go along. Okay. So Borger Financial Services, what was that exactly? It's a very, very small financial firm focusing on retirement planning that operated out of Edison, Highland Park, Edison, actually, like the town next to New Brunswick. And they've been hiring Rutgers students as interns for quite a long time. And they, put up like ads on Facebook and put up on like Rutgers alumni networks and stuff like that to try to hire people. And it's only 3 people. It's the actual guy, Ellie Borger, and a primary assistant and a secondary assistant. And because it's so small, it's just very front to back. You see kind of how the business works, right? Like he is going around selling financial products to clients to help them with their retirement planning. So these are like very long dated, very future looking products that are being sold. And you also need to get an understanding of what those products are, how to sell them, like being able to explain why this matters for your customers and for your clients. And when they say yes and actually give you their signature, how to make that happen, which is a whole different story, right? Just because you sell somebody saying that, oh, okay, you're gonna give me your money and I'm gonna give you this product. How do you actually get that product in motion and registered with the proper authorities and regulations? And then how do you record that information and how do you report on that? Yeah. So because it's very small, it's very laid back as well, and you get I got a very front to back view of how a business operates. Okay. And as we go on, I've tried to put on key learnings at the bottom here of like the big important things that I've picked up at each role, and kind of keep in mind that these are going to be cumulative. Just because I learned time management here doesn't mean that I forgot time management later. So this is just like a continuous build up of your skills, and that's also how it's going to be for you, like as you go through your careers and your roles. And I guess one of the things here is that a lot of these, even though it seems like a very small firm and a very small opportunity, a lot of the people that do these things go on to do other things and bigger things, right? So at the second to bottom bullet there, a lot of people have gone on to Harvard, NYU Law, Citi Investment Banking, the actual NY Fed, the Supreme Court, and some other key names on their site. Yep, so that was maybe my first key business type professional experience, and I've included some pictures just to show what it looks like, and you can kind of see how the other roles in the future also look different too. So The guy on the top right is Eli, really good guy, Orthodox Jewish guy, and the whole operation was ran out of his house on the left. And there's a bicycle under there because I would be riding a bicycle to and from work from my dorm in Rutgers at the Silvers Apartments to be exact. And yeah, it's just like doing like a normal 9 to 5 and then going to evening classes as well as summer classes and weekend classes. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but ultimately I think it was worth it. And that bread on the right there is called a challah. I think I'm getting it right. It's like a Jewish name for a Jewish bread. And since he was Orthodox, a lot of his work hours revolved around his views and his culture and his traditions and stuff. Like, for example, on Fridays he needed to turn off all of his electricity in his house by the time the sun set. So he would kick me out at like 3:30, especially around like the winter, like getting closer to the winter months. But his wife would always cook food as well, because they also need to cook enough food for the weekend, and she would send me home with home cooked Jewish food. It's actually really good. It was one of the perks that I had working here, but unfortunately I never got any perks like that again after I've left. And then I guess for the second one, after I've been done with Borger, so I worked with Ellie in my sophomore and my junior year, again kind of working at the same time as I was going to school and all that stuff. And as part of PwC, typically their internship program is also in your junior year, and they do it kind of for like maybe a month or 2 or 3 months or so. It's kind of like a stretch, and they try to position it around your around your school study schedule as well. But there was a specific internship program here called the National Professional Services Group, which is essentially just like a year-long full-time work thing. So it's kind of like an extended internship program. And I got into that. So in my senior year, I was working with PwC and doing that work with them. And I guess this is where it becomes very relevant for you guys, especially at your age group, on how to get that recognition with corporates and companies that might be coming to your colleges and looking to recruit. Because PwC was one of the bigger recruiting companies, especially for the accounting firms in Rutgers. They've got a lot more recruitment programs at a lot more schools kind of across the nation, but so do a lot of colleges, right? So there's going to be job fairs and internship fairs and things like that, where all these recruiters get together and try to get your attention to join them, and conversely, you will also try to get their attention in trying to join their firm, or at least kind of getting your foot in the door and then being able to make a decision yourself, right? And one of the good ways of doing that is to pay attention to what sort of things actually happen in your school. There's a bullet here, the first one, that says recognition via the X-Tax competition in my sophomore and junior years. X-Tax was a competition that PwC ran in Rutgers, as well as a whole bunch of other colleges. And yeah, since it's a competition, there's work involved, and you got to prepare things and be able to present and all that stuff, which again is difficult, especially if you're doing a lot in school and whatnot. But these are the types of opportunities that you can use to present yourself and kind of get yourself out there, right? And I remember when I was doing that, I was really annoyed, because I was kind of like, well, why do I need to do that? Why can't I just go and say hello and put in my resume and that's it, right? I guess you could, and certainly there's been a lot of people who have been picked up kind of by doing that. But these programs, these companies do put these programs in for a reason. So it is a benefit to actually be aware of them and take advantage of them as you can. At least in my case, that X-Tax competition, when I joined in sophomore year, so as a quick bit of introduction, that X-Tax thing was, they give you a fake situation, like a fake country that has fake stats of like how many people live in it, what sort of socioeconomic classes exist in it, right? And what are the current tax rates and tax rules and things like that. And then they say, we want to implement we want to achieve an objective that is like, we want the population to lose weight, let's say, right? And then they ask you, how would you structure your tax laws to achieve that outcome? So I guess like things like that would be like, oh, well, you might want to give tax rebates for healthier foods, or like tax rebates to people who exercise or whatever, and like, so it's kind of like a critical thinking and creativity exercise, at least for the competition that I did. And there was another competition for X-Act, which was kind of similar, but for accounting topics. And in my sophomore year, I had won second place, and in my junior year, I had won first. So that was a good way of getting my name out there. And then again, doing the full-year internship, whether it's a full-year internship or more traditional, few months internship, it's again an opportunity for you to kind of show that you can actually adapt to the workflow and the new concepts and topics, right? Nobody's expecting when you go into these things that you're going to be perfect. You have a perfect working knowledge of accounting or whatever you are studying. They just expect you to be able to learn and to be able to hear things and not act like a know-it-all. Like I've definitely seen interns and new starters who acted like they knew kind of everything and didn't take advice or whatever. And those are the ones that kind of fell off very quickly, right? So what people are really looking for is, are you able to learn? Are you able to adapt? Are you able to take feedback and work that into your working style, right? And a little bit the MPSG, it's an accounting research support thing, which kind of gets very technical. But again, it gave me some exposure to other teams that were out there. So say accounting teams in the field working on complicated accounting topics, they would call our team up and try to get some of our time to help with them with research. And when I say research, you can think of it as almost like Googling, right? If you're looking to understand something, you just go on Google and you just try to figure out like how does a car engine work, and you kind of learn more about it. It's just that these companies have specific databases and specified kind of topics that they are interested in, not how a car works, but how does accounting work in a complex multinational kind of tax treaty concept, like that sort of thing. So I guess, as we go through this, there's going to be a lot of terms that seem really complicated, but really if you boil it down, it's not too complicated. The complication really occurs because there's a lot of these overlapping with each other, but more often than not, you can boil things down into pretty simple and direct terms and direct concepts that you can work with, and that's the value, right? If you're able to do that, and if you're also able to explain that to people, that's money. So again, once the internship was over, I was able to transition that into a full-time role in PwC in New York. And again, the key learnings here that I got was more time management, because again, I was working at the same time as going to Rutgers. And since this was like a more formal 9 to 5, I remember I took a summer program to catch up with like the courses that I wasn't able to finish because of that. So has to be some like adaptability and flexibility to make that work. Accounting audit topics, which is just dry, kind of boring technical stuff, but really more working in a corporate environment and communicating was the key things. Because yeah, aside from Borger, Ellie's a really nice guy, but it's a very small operation. There's that kind of element of like how do you conduct yourself and behave yourself in a wider corporate setting that's kind of missing, and this is where I really picked it up, at least for the first time. Okay, and then after the internship, PwC in New York, and this was kind of my first view into banking and financial services as a sector, as an industry, because my one and only client then was JP Morgan, which you guys will probably recognize the name as one of the biggest banks in the world. Finished and obtained my CPA license, which was also, studying for the CPA at the same time as doing internship, as well as, at a job at this point, as well as kind of finishing up like whatever studies I had left was another time juggle. And this was when I really started getting exposed to, how does a corporation, how does a big company actually operate, right? Because on the one hand, PwC is a big company, it's a big accounting firm, so you have to kind of navigate how the structure works in PwC, especially for your development and your advancement, but also your client, because you are now interfacing with another company that's made up of other employees and other people like that, right? And how do you make sure that you get what you need out of them at the right time without annoying them, right? Because especially for like the accounting space, it kind of is annoying because people in JP Morgan are doing their jobs and you are walking up to them trying to figure out what they do and asking them a lot of questions and asking them to send you a whole bunch of things that is not their day job. Yeah. like I get it, like it's kind of annoying, and so because of that, you also need to kind of learn how to ask for it nicely, and also try to know what you're asking for, and these are kind of skills that help you in real life as well, right? It's not just accounting and technical topics like that. It's also talking to people and trying to get what you're after in the most efficient manner, right? So as part of JP Morgan, without getting into too much detail, there's a lot of individual teams working on JP Morgan just because it's such a big company. So I did have a chance to switch between that. So there's a CIB, corporate and investment bank side of things, as well as a securities broker side of things that I had worked on. So kind of getting to see how different portions of JP Morgan operate and how they interacted with each other was interesting. And then, again, the meetings and interviews is just a matter of like, how do you talk to people and how do you get what you need, right? And then, again, like the last bullet point there on the design and implement audit test is more of a technical thing. It's very accounting specific, so I won't get into that too much. But again, it's about knowing how to do your job well, and a lot of that is like opening your ears and listening to your team and your seniors on how best they do things, but also having a critical thinking mind and thinking of, well, is that really the best way to do things, right? It's going to be easy to fall into this mindset of, oh, well, this is the process and this is how they've always done it. This is how I'm told to do it. Therefore, this is how I do it. But really, and this becomes a lot more obvious later on, is that these processes are just kind of there, and there's always a way that they can be done better, especially because the world continues to change. So I would kind of encourage you guys to think about, whatever you guys do, how do I make this better, or why am I doing this, or that kind of thinking is a key thing that is a little bit difficult to be taught as well. Oh yes, and just some pictures. So on the left side there, that was the Florham Park office where I went for my senior year internship, the NPSG. And at that point, I ditched my bike and got a car, which was nice, the Hyundai Elantra, which and it was a manual, and I almost crashed it the first time because I didn't know how to drive stick, and until I drove it off the lot. That was fun. And then on the right side is the PwC building in New York, and on the bottom is Disneyland, because as a part of the internship program, they did send us to Disneyland as part of a big kind of intern development program. And the reason I put that up there is because there's some key stories to be learned there. It is essentially a huge party filled with interns from all over the different PwC offices coming to Disneyland and doing like these corporate development activities, fine, but then you also get time to yourself to do whatever you want in Disney. And the lesson here is to don't do anything stupid, because at least when I went, and like the years before me and the years after me, I always kind of heard that something stupid happened and some interns lost their offers because they did stupid things. So yeah, there's kind of a key lesson there. There's going to be a lot of those events and lots of opportunities to potentially slip up. So just kind of mind yourself. And on the bottom left, it's just your typical kind of corporate activity picture. It's to indicate that you guys should stay in the picture and don't do anything to fall out of that picture. And hopefully you guys will have a career. And this is not just for PwC, but anywhere else, right? Yeah. Now, after PwC, after having done a few busy seasons in JP Morgan, and those busy seasons were extremely, extremely long hours. There were a handful of times where I slept in the office. After a few times of that, I was probably like, nah, this isn't for me. Interestingly, the turnover rate in the team was also pretty high, and I was one of the last in my graduating class to leave PwC. But then afterwards, I wanted to continue doing my career experience in the banking and financial services sector. So I was interviewing around with a number of different banks and different financial firms. And Macquarie was one of them. And I thought Macquarie was interesting because they had me take a test before the interview, and they were the only ones to do so. This is apparently a typical thing in Australia. Since Macquarie is an Australian bank, they had me take a test, and it was kind of like a mini SAT, like mathematical, reading comprehension, and then an IQ and personality test. And I was like, wow, these guys are a little bit over the top, aren't they? But ultimately, once I took the test and I was speaking with them, it was very interesting because I guess because they were also Australian and they're kind of a different type of financial services company, they had a lot of interesting things that I hadn't heard about from some of the other companies that I was interviewing at, and I ultimately went with them. So again, this is, especially at this point, is where it gets a little bit technical in the wording. I'm not expecting you guys to understand everything that's up on screen, but when I was getting hired, I remember they were looking to hire because they were doing some major restructuring around how tax profit sharing works between Australia and the US. Now, as a very simple example, what was happening was that, say for example, there is a guy who knows a client in the US, but the product and the people who actually write the contracts and does the back office work is in Sydney. The guy in the US will introduce the client to the guy in Sydney, and the guy in Sydney will write all the whatever, like all of the agreements and the paperwork underlying the product, and then they will send it back to the US guy, and the US guy will liaise with the client to get it signed. So in doing that, there's a split of work between the US and Australia, right? And because of that, if say you earn $100 from selling that product, you should split the $100 between the US and Australia, right? We're not gonna, let's just call it 50-50. But what was happening was that the tax authority in the US was looking at that and saying, hey, why did you send $50 overseas to Australia, and why did you report $50 only as your taxable income? We don't agree with that. We're gonna tax you the whole $100. But then we already sent $50 to Australia, and you were taxed for the $50 in Australia. So that means that the $50 you sent to Australia was taxed in Australia and was also taxed in the US, and that was causing some huge and kind of stupid tax liability rates and things like that, and they were trying to fix that up. And the reason why this is interesting is because I had no experience at all with tax. And I remember saying in the interview, they sat me down, they're like, oh, it'd be good, we're trying to hire somebody to help with the international tax sharing kind of restructuring plan. And I was like, all right, okay, I don't have any experience in tax. And they're like, okay, that's fine, but it'd be good if you had some sort of knowledge around how transfer pricing works and how it works between different types of countries and different types of agreements. And I was like, yep, still no experience in tax. And they hired me anyway, which I thought was crazy, but I guess they saw that I was, again, kind of eager to learn and able to say what I didn't know and how I would go about fixing it. So again, it doesn't mean that you guys have to be perfect in your responses about what you know, and certainly don't pretend that you know something and then get caught out in a lie later. Sometimes the best option is just to say what you don't know, but then being able to show that you're able to learn and be able to fix that, right? So that's a bit of a lesson there that I learned. And all this stuff is kind of all technical stuff. But after that project was over, and about a year and a half, I was kind of doing some this and that jobs at Macquarie, New York, because after the project was over, they were kind of like looking for a place to put me in, like looking for a team to put me in. And that's when my manager at the time, he went over to Sydney to do a 6-month secondment over there, and on the way back over, he offered me a 2-year secondment in Sydney. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, why not? Like, I've always just kind of lived around North Jersey and New York, so if you're offering to send me to a new country and you're gonna give me a job there and you're gonna pay for my trip over there and all that, yeah, why not, right? So that's how I ended up in Sydney. So again, some of the key learnings here is working with different teams, which is kind of similar to working with clients that I mentioned before, but in this case, it's kind of different teams that have different specialities. So at this point, you also have to understand how those specialities work and how they relate to the things that you're doing. And how to learn new concepts again, presentation skills, project planning, yeah. I couldn't really find too many good pictures about Macquarie, New York, to be perfectly honest. But the bottom right is a prank that I had pulled on me when I first went there. I don't know if you guys have eaten Vegemite, but it's very salty and it's very umami. No? Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. But anyway, they told me it was basically the Australian Nutella, and I put a whole bunch of it on my toast, and And they watched me do it, and they watched me take a bite, and I spat the whole thing out because, yeah, it's not Nutella. It's very salty and very umami. So, yeah, just in case you guys have a chance to eat it. It's actually really nice, just in small amounts. It's actually one of my favorite things now, but I just had a very bad first experience, just so that in case you guys get exposed to this, don't fall for it. All right, so Macquarie, Australia. This is where I got, well, first of all, it's a new country, so it's kind of exciting. Works differently. The people are different. The accents are different. The laws are different, and the politics are different as well. The food is also different. So I was having a great time just kind of exploring and getting to know a new country that I didn't have to pay for because the company had paid for me to be there and give me a job as well. But this was really when I started comprehending how complicated some of these companies were, okay? Because the US is just one region that Macquarie operates in. Macquarie operates in a lot of other countries as well, so we're a very global company, and not only different regions, there's a lot of different business lines that they operate in, like selling like soft commodities, which are like wheat and rice and other like agricultural products, to selling mining ores, steel, gold, that sort of thing, as well as doing home leases and issuing credit cards and giving you savings accounts for you and me, like when we need to go and deposit money, as well as doing classical and more traditional investment banking type stuff, and as well as doing the financing and owning bridges and roads and things like that. So Macquarie does a whole bunch of things, and this was maybe my first real look at, wow, Macquarie does a lot of things in a lot of different places. Because again, in the US, it was more US focused stuff, but in the head office, you kind of get a better view of where everything is. And yeah, this was when I was getting really nervous and anxious about the stuff that I would have to learn and all of that stuff. So, and again, I'm not going to go into too much technical detail. Like, I don't know why I put so much up on these slides. I think it was partly to give myself a guiding view on how to talk about this. But again, it's more about being able to work with different teams and different concepts and learning. But also at this point, it was also about being able to reach your own conclusions and defend them. If you think something should be done in this way, being able to explain why, and being able to defend yourself when people try to poke holes in it. And they're not trying to poke holes because they don't like you. They're trying to poke holes because it's everyone's job to do that. So that whole mindset of doing critical thinking and all that stuff also applies to the work that you guys do too. You guys look at what you guys do and you guys think, well, could it have been done better? Can it be done better? And where can it fall apart, right? So that's a lot of what I do currently. It's a lot of risk management. So one of the things that I do like about working in Macquarie that's not directly related to your job is the office. So that office is kind of what my current office looks like. It's a huge atrium. There's maybe 11 floors, and the middle is just this big open space, and you can kind of look out in it. And this is a architectural thing that Macquarie does in all of their other offices too. Like their London office does it. They renovated the New York office after I left to look like that, which kind of sucks. But yeah, it's just they seem to be a bit forward thinking in terms of how they set up their workspaces. And we're also building a new building for all of us to move into by 2024, if COVID hasn't delayed it. And on the bottom right is our CEO, Shamara, who is a Sri Lankan woman, yeah, I think. And I guess going into here, after I've moved to Australia, I'll try to break this down into very simple terms, and this is kind of getting into what I've actually done as part of my role, right? So FP&A stands for Financial Planning and Analysis, and this is a term that you guys might hear over here as well, because it's kind of an industry term about a certain type of function that exists in not just banks, but all types of companies, because everybody needs to be able to do this. And essentially, the three things that I was doing as part of that FP&A function was analysis, forecasting, and reporting. And I've tried to make it simple by putting it into a question that we're trying to answer. Like, how do you want, for the analysis, how much did I make this month, previous months, and why did I make that much, right? And forecasting is how much will I make in the future, and what could change it, and what can I do to change it. And the reporting is who needs to know what information to make which decisions. I'm not going to get too much into doing each one of those, but that's basically the job, right? And the ability to boil these things down into simple questions is a good skill to have, and something that will serve you well going forward. And my main focus on, as part of the group FP&A team, in terms of analyzing and forecasting P&L, was focusing on the group treasury team, which I'll get into in a little bit. And from here, the key learnings kind of start accelerating into less about smaller things and more about being able to present to very senior stakeholders and other teams, and again, convincing people that your way is right, or convincing them that the things you are presenting is correct, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is producing information that people will take and make decisions with. So you need to be able to make sure that your information is good and that you are the right person to show this information to other people. So that's, yeah. So just a quick intro to what Group Treasury is. Group Treasury is a central department that looks at the funding and capital management of the group. Now, funding and capital management basically boils down to how much money do we need to do business, and how do we get that money, right? So say for example, if you wanted to buy something for $100 and sell it for $120 a little bit later and make $20, how are you going to get the first $100 to buy the thing? Maybe you borrow 80 from your friend or from your parents or something, right? And that borrowing of $80 is something we call debt, okay, debt funding. And of course, if you're borrowing it from your parents, you probably are not going to be paying interest, because hopefully your parents wouldn't charge you interest. But typically you would pay interest on the $80 of debt funding. And then maybe the $20 you save up with your own money, and that's your capital, okay? There's no obligation to return capital, but it's money that's been generated out of your own kind of operations, and you use it for your business purposes, okay? So that's a 20-80 split, 20 capital, 80 debt. And it's the same concept that we do here, because in this case, when we say we're gonna buy a $100 product and then sell it for $120, that could be gold, right? Like we will buy $100 worth of gold now, and then later on down the line, if we think that the market will make the gold prices higher, up to 120 at some point, then we'll sell it then. But we need to get money to buy the gold in the first place. And that's what Group Treasury does at its very, very, very basic boiled down version. And instead of gold, it's a whole range of different products, between houses, gold, oil, gas, bridges, airplanes, cars, etc., and so forth. So that's why it's quite complicated, and that's why there's a lot of effort into trying to understand what is actually happening and making sure that people know that in order to make good decisions. So some of the key learnings here is very technical at this point, because the concepts are no longer so simple, and this is getting to like complicated financial products and how we use that to manage our own risk and our own operations and things like that. And also one of the key things coming up now is how we interact with our regulator. So regulation is basically rules and laws that dictate how you're supposed to do business, right? APRA is our regulator, the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority in Australia, and that's who we answer to the most. And it's a lot of kind of interaction back and forth, right? Because they're always kind of asking us questions about, well, how are you doing this? What does this mean? And are you doing this safely and all that stuff? And it's up to us to explain to them how we're doing it, but also make sure that we get our core message across. Because if we can't do that, then there's every chance that the regulator might look at us and say, you know, I don't understand what you're doing, that's too risky, and then force us to stop doing it. And then all of a sudden we have to change a lot of what we do very quickly. So So it's a lot of that. So it's a lot of negotiation and a lot of presentation to people that are outside the company, which is a very, very critical and almost risky thing to do. But again, it's another skill to learn, right? So while I was in Australia, I've moved teams 3 times. Not because I was chasing after it, but because those opportunities were presented to me. Like, while I'll be doing my job, and then somebody from another team will come up to me and ask, "Hey, are you interested in taking up this role in this other team?" And I say, "Yes, why not?" Because actually, I was getting kind of bored doing this other thing for such a long time. I might as well do something new, right? And that's happened 2 times. And at this point, I'm on my 3rd formal role in Macquarie, Australia. And this one has to do with what we call intragroup. So Macquarie Group, again, like I said, it's made up of a whole bunch of different business lines, different regions, but also different mini companies, basically, which we call entities, legal entities. And Macquarie has a lot of these. Macquarie has maybe thousands of individual mini company entities within that group, and each one has a specific purpose and why they were made. But also, they also interact with each other within that group, right? And this can get very complicated. So I guess the key thing here is that previously in the past, nobody used to really care about this intergroup space because everyone was kind of focused on, okay, how do we sell stuff to external people and make money by doing business that way? And there was not so much focus around like, okay, how do we make sure that all of the things happening internal to the group are also well understood and well managed. So over the last few years, there's been a lot of focus around that. Our regulator was coming in and asking questions like, well, what are you guys doing behind the curtain, right? Because there's a curtain of what we show to the external party, external kind of investors and stuff. But all the internal things kind of happen internally, like within our company. So they were asking, how are you guys managing it? So I was put onto a team to help try to make sense of all of that. There were already a lot of processes in place, but there was also a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for adjustment and fixes. And this is also, again, I keep saying this, but like critical thinking and being able to kind of step back, look at something that's been being done for maybe 20 years and asking yourself, is this the best way to do it? How do we change it? Can we change it? And if so, how do we do that? So that's a lot of what I do at the moment, asking those questions and seeing if we can change things. And sometimes it's very confusing because the world isn't black and white, right? It's very shades of gray, and sometimes we might reach a good decision, sometimes we might not reach a good decision, but we won't know until later. So it's a lot of kind of decisions being made on imperfect information. And that's what some of these key learnings are, right? Like how quickly things can change, how to review decisions made in the past and react, how to convince people your way is the right one. What do you do if your way was not actually the right way? And are you able to learn from it and change it? These are all key skills that I'm still learning how to do, to be honest. So, yeah, this was the last slide. I have a whole bunch of appendix slide which goes into Macquarie's results and stuff, but we definitely don't need to look at that and do that. Hopefully, I didn't take too much time by going through my life story so far, and hopefully, I can leave time open for questions. Jason? Yeah?
Yeah, we do have a few questions.
Okay.
All right. We thank you for amazing forums. I know that we all heard about your career path and all that, but what does a work day look like for you? Like how I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things that you have to do in your life, but how do you maintain, all these things like working life or spiritual life
Yep.
or what else or like working out and stuff like that. So could you briefly like describe your work day?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it comes and goes, right? Because sometimes work gets really busy for a few weeks, for a few months, and then kind of goes back down. So I guess a day in the life at the moment looks like me getting up, and I'm at the moment I'm working from in the office itself, and working from home half. So maybe like 2-3 days at home and 2-3 days in the office. So most of the time, if I'm commuting, then it'll take some time. I kind of bike in. I have a locker in the office as well where I have like my work clothes and stuff. So I just kind of get up out of bed and leave immediately. I don't even take time to wake up. I just walk out the door and then do my waking up in the lockers. And then when I get into work, I'll probably have meetings with the US team. So, you know, a lot of my work at the moment is regional based. So I have a lot of calls with the US team, with the London team and all that. So early morning Australia is evening time in the US. So it'll be meetings then, and then meetings, and then more meetings. There's a lot of meetings actually in my work day, and I have to try to find time in between to actually get my actual work done. And yeah, it's just kind of like being able to carve out the time in between when I have to do things and be able to, like, that also goes for like working out too, and like my own personal life, because oftentimes I'll also have meetings with the London team on specific things, and they're on the total opposite side of the time spectrum. So their morning is Australian evening, so I'll kind of leave work at around like 6 or something, and then go to the gym, and then come back and at around like 9:30, 10, take like a 30-minute call or so, because I have to talk to like the London team. But I also try to push back on those a bit, saying that, oh, if you need me, can you try to put it in an email or something? And it's a lot of that balance too, right? And it's something that I'm trying to perfect, which I don't think I'll ever perfect, but it's always an attempt. And yeah, again, when the work gets kind of really busy, then, you know, I don't really have a choice. I have to let go of some of the personal things I do. But then when the work goes down a bit, then I'll just be doing like a normal kind of 9 to 5 and just turn off of work and then just do my own thing personally after that. Yeah. Next question. So, what skill do you think you are most important for someone who's interested in this career track? I guess you work for so long time, right? What
Yeah.
is the skill that you need to have,
Yeah.
develop in this age? The most important skill has been to know when you don't know something and say so, and figure out how to know that, essentially. That could be by asking someone, it could be as simple as asking someone, but also sometimes, especially as you kind of climb up, you'll find that not everybody kind of knows how to do something, and then it's kind of up to you to look around and figure out how best to do something, right? And that's difficult too, especially when nobody really knows, and you know, you're kind of a junior person in a company, in your team, and you think it should be done this way, but it's kind of different to what people are expecting. And again, this is when you need to be able to convince people that your way is the right way and be able to support that. So I would say that that's the biggest skill, being able to recognize when you don't know something and figuring out how to find that out. Yeah. So next question is, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Oh, that's what I forgot. That's what I don't know what happened to that slide, but like the what will I do slide. Yeah, I don't know what happened to that, but just yeah, just I don't know what happened, but I'm just gonna answer it anyway. So I guess 5 to 10 years, I don't know, to be honest, because like I said before, these roles that I'm working at now just kind of came to me as I was doing things. I was also supposed to stay in Australia for only 2 years, but that just didn't happen. And now I've got my Australian citizenship and all that. So yeah, no, I totally failed at that. So I guess while I don't know, I have figured out that I do like being challenged with questions that don't have an easy answer. So I've been doing a lot of project work in my 6 years in Australia, and I do like that. Yeah, so I guess in terms of project work and trying to figure out answers to questions, you know, I'd be trying to do something in renewable energy because it's a growing space, you know, and there's also a lot of business to be made there, and there's also a lot of new topics and new management and new ways to account for that in that. So I'd be looking to do that. Infrastructure and real asset management, so basically like bridges, roads, and things like that, because these are things that everybody uses, right? And making sure that those are modern and maintained and effective in the future is going to be a very important thing. So I think that
now that I've been working with a lot with things that are invisible, like numbers and presentations and things like that, I do find myself wanting to work with things that are real and things that I can see, that I can say that, oh, I've helped to develop that or create that or make that and things like that. And it's not just about building it too, because there's a lot of work around making sure that the money gets to where it needs to be in order to make a project like these roads happen, right? And that's, I guess, the part of the things that I would like to do. And I guess one of the other things, maybe 5 to 10 years, is a new country. So that's London on the left, and that's Singapore on the right. And this is something that I've told to my team as well, saying that I would be interested in doing a secondment over in one of those countries at some point. And we do have offices in these countries, so it's definitely like a very real thing. Just making sure that my personal life also matches up with being able to move out. So yeah, I guess I don't have a clear answer, but I would like to move towards continuing to help answer questions and stuff, and of course, doing so within God's plan. Yeah. Last question is, do you have any prayer topic that you want to share? Oh yeah, I would like to share a prayer topic that I figure out what I'm doing. It's because there's a lot of times where I really don't know what I'm doing, like either in my workspace or even in my personal life. Especially with COVID, it kind of broke a lot of personal habits and personal kind of cycles and ways of life, right? So it's a bit tricky getting things back up to speed and seeing how things change. So I would really pray for me to kind of know what I'm going to be doing in all respects, within God's plan. That's probably it. And I guess that's normal too, right? Like I guess it's kind of normal to feel like you don't really know what you're doing and you don't know where you're going, but that's okay, because you can pray for that. And even if you have some idea, that's a first step, and it's a good start. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody. Let's pray. Father God, thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to use my experience as a case study, and hopefully my experiences that you have granted me will also be used to guide the youth group members that have been listening to me today. And God, I pray that you would truly watch over all of us and help us to find our path and our meaning within your schedule and within your plan. I pray that you would lift us up and you would use our skills to really make us into the summits that we can be, in order to lead lead people that do not believe in you to you, Lord. Father, I thank you once again, and in Christ's name I pray. Amen.